believes that they will not. I love you. Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. When it comes to American politics specifically and European politics in general, there's nothing like playing the Russia card. If there's something wrong or there's something you don't like, well, simply blame Vladimir Putin. That is exactly what the CIA is doing. To Crosstalk Russia's alleged involvement in American politics, I'm joined by my guest in Washington, Philip Giraldi. He's a former CIA counterterrorism specialist who is now executive director of the Council for the National Interest and Rights for the American Conservative. We also have Ray McGovern. He is a former CIA analyst and co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And we have James Jatras. He is a former advisor to the U.S. Senate Republican leadership. All right, gentlemen, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Philip, if I can go to you first in Washington. You're all in Washington today. You know, the mainstream media in the last news cycle is now upping the story, intensifying the story about Russia's alleged involvement in American politics, that Vladimir Putin personally was involved in this, and it was because of a personal vendetta he had with Hillary Clinton. I'd like to point out, ever since this story broke during the campaign and after it's continued, no physical forensic evidence has been provided to the public by any of these agencies, particularly the CIA, that now we know has some kind of secret report on this. No evidence has been provided, but a lot of people have run with it as if it's true. Go ahead, Philip.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the key to this story is the fact that there is no key in this story. They have produced no evidence whatsoever. This is all speculation insofar as we can tell. It's basically a narrative that certain people are supporting because they think it's plausible. But the fact is that if you're accusing the head of state of an important nation of being specifically and directly involved in what would be considered an unconscionable act, like interfering in someone else's election, you have to produce the evidence, and they haven't done so. The other thing I would mention is that the way this story is being framed, it's the CIA against Trump and against Putin. Well, in fact, it's not the CIA, really. It's John Brennan, who's the head of the CIA and is very, very close to President Barack Obama. I would suspect that this is a political agenda that's been unfolding. CIA doesn't go around and do these kinds of reports. This report logically would have gone to the NSA.
Exactly.
And so this was something that they were instructed to do. They were ordered to do by the White House. The CIA works for the White House. Brennan works for the White House.
Okay, so Ray, if I can go to you, this is more of a, if there's a vendetta here, it's on the part of Brennan against Russia, against Vladimir Putin. It's the other way around, isn't it? Go ahead.
Well, it's a red herring in every sense of that word. You know, we in Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity have the honor and the privilege of having at our disposal retired officials with expertise that won't quit. And among those officials is Bill Binney and Kurt Wiebe from the NSA. Now, Bill pretty much constructed NSA systems. He was the technical director when he left after 9/11. So we asked Bill, how about the technical part of this?
Yeah.
Is it possible? Is it possible that someone could have hacked, anyone, Russians or anybody, into these servers and not be detected by the NSA? And Bill said, okay, I'll tell you about that. And he adduced all these graphics, all these slides from Ed Snowden showing that every email originated, and at the end, these things can be traced. And so if it was a hack, NSA would know about it. And if they knew about it, there's no reason in the world why they wouldn't divulge what messages or what emails they have. It's not sensitive technology. You can buy it in
yeah. You know, let me
Starbucks.
let me go to James here. James, I read the article that Ray is referring to. It's at consortiumnews.com, and I suggest everyone go there. It's an excellent piece of work. But, you know, James, it seems no one really in the establishment wants to say it was a leak from somebody in the inside. That's how they got access to this material. It is an insider in the U.S., probably in the political establishment. Who knows, maybe someone in the intelligence community, maybe someone even in the Democratic Party did this, okay, because of what they did to Bernie Sanders, all right? I mean, but these kind of things are not talked about, and these are very rational, logical trains of thought. This is something that should be considered, but no. NBC is absolutely convinced that Putin was personally involved in this operation. Go ahead, James.
Well, that's right. And I think the most disturbing thing we have here, Peter, is that if you look at it in the big picture, the politics of it, what we're looking at is essentially what looks to me like a conspiracy to subvert the constitutional order. You have some elements of the intelligence community, perhaps including CIA Director Brennan himself, colluding with the mainstream media, namely the Washington Post, the New York Times, and then picked up by the rest of the media, in order to do what? Not only to delegitimate the Trump presidency and maybe to poison the well for any kind of rapprochement with Moscow, but also specifically to subvert the electors from casting their votes on December 19th the way they were instructed by the voters of their states. I mean, this is the equivalent legally of jury tampering or witness tampering, except with far more far-reaching consequences to actually try to nullify the results of an election by what I consider unconstitutional means.
You know, Philip, it's really interesting. In the 7 years that I've been doing this program, we've looked at a number of forced regime changes around the world that the U.S. and its allies have been involved in. It seems really quite interesting that the Russes have come home. We see forced regime change in the United States by these rogue elements right here. I mean, if there's any meddling in American politics, it is the CIA, members of the media, and who knows who else here. It's inside, and this is very dangerous. These same practices that are used around the world are now being used inside the U.S. itself.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I would also point out that if there's any disruption in our democratic system, it's basically been caused by the two extremely corrupt parties that have been in power. But the hypocrisy issue is a major issue too. I was a CIA officer operating in Europe and the Middle East. I know firsthand the extent to which the United States was involving itself in elections throughout the world, basically, starting in the 1950s. And we have regime change, and we have all kinds of things. And this is not even being alluded to in the stories that are appearing in the mainstream media. The fact that the U.S. is the master at doing this kind of thing, and now we're accusing the Russians, and we're accusing the Russians without any evidence, whereas there is tons of evidence in terms of what the United States was up to over the course of more than 60 years.
You know, Ray, weigh in on that here, because it seems to me that, first of all, the media really, there was an epic fail covering the election, the liberal media, and now we have this here. I mean, this story has consequences no matter how it plays out here. Okay, we could see bad blood, Trump having bad blood with the security forces, intelligence forces. I mean, this is something, it's such an accusation. And then at some point, somebody's going to say those golden words, something must be done, and it could be very dangerous what they're thinking about. Go ahead, Ray.
Well, they are thinking about doing something for this egregious attempt to affect our election. Now, the only problem I have with citing what we did in Europe and elsewhere is that there's a false equivalency there. There's lots of evidence that we did that. There's no evidence that the Russians have done this as they've accused. Now, you get all kinds of people. That former deputy director, what was his, Michael
Morrell,
whatever he was on Charlie Rose. Mike Morrell, yeah. Right, it's Mike Morrell, and he was on his grandfather Charlie Rose's program again for the 11th time within 1 year. And Charlie says, what about this? And he says, wow, we got to retaliate, and probably one of the best ways would be give offensive weapons to the Ukrainians.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
So let me just repeat. There's a big difference between a leak and a hack. A leak is done physically. That's what Bradley or Chelsea Manning did. That's what Ed Snowden did, okay? That's a leak. Now, to hack, there's an electronic signal that is produced that NSA, our experts say, inevitably will be able to trace through these tens of thousands of trace mechanisms through the system, trace who sent it and who received it. So what we've got here is a situation where the physical manifestations of this don't bear out. Now, the other thing is this, and I don't want to hog the time here, but Craig Murray, the former UK ambassador to Uzbekistan, is a very good friend of mine. He is one of the awardees of the Sam Adams Award for Integrity and Intelligence. He claims that he met the source. He claims that he talked to the source. And I can substantiate that claim.
And I'm pretty sure that he's not a Russian here. Let me go to James. James, what kind of legacy is the CIA going to have here if it doesn't produce any evidence? Because it doesn't look like it's going to. And all of us on this program and many watching this program are going to have their doubts. I mean, you know, the CIA has a pattern of deception. Part of their job is to lie. Okay, go ahead, James.
Well, that's right, and also just keep in mind that this is not the first time we've seen cooked intelligence because of political actors. I mean, even the Trump campaign responded to this to saying these are the same people that brought us the story about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that we know that unfortunately sometimes the intelligence community or elements of the community will respond to political direction. But it also appears that we do have a split, that the story keeps getting spun that there's a consensus here, or even, quote, unanimity, which is certainly not the case.
Not the case.
When we also have indications that the FBI is not going along with this, and the NSA has said nothing about it.
Okay, you know, gentlemen, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Russia's alleged hacking. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing Russia's alleged hacking. Okay, I'd like to go back to Philip. You know, it's really interesting, again, no matter how this plays out, because I don't think any evidence is going to be revealed. It's always this trust me. I can't believe they're still trying to do that. But anyway, but one thing seems to be sure in my mind. Maybe they're trying to influence the electors on the 19th of December, maybe. But one thing is undeniable is that this is going to be something that's going to follow Trump in the White House. So with anything he has to do with Russia, with NATO, with anything, there's always, the media is always going to cast doubt on him. And this is a way to cripple him, which is really, it's crippling the nation. So this, again, these people, these sore losers in the Democratic Party and other elements within the government and the media, of course, I mean, they're intentionally inflicting harm on the next administration. Don't you think? Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. I think that probably the major motivation for surfacing this story at this time and spinning it the way it's being spun is to hurt Trump. The unfortunate result of this is that there are other consequences too. I think the relationship between the United States and Russia is the most important relationship in the world for both countries. And there is no reason on earth why the two countries should not be working together to resolve problems problems like Syria. And the fact is, the people that are going after Trump are also historically the people that are anti-Russian, that are pro-Ukrainian, that are in favor of war with increasing American involvement in Syria. You see John McCain, you see Lindsey Graham, you see a host of neocons in the media. They're all coming out of the woodwork on this one. So it's an agenda that will have real consequences, both for the next president of the United States and also for the critical relationship between our two countries.
Ray, Philip brings up a really good point here, because this is the only thing that I can put all of these dots together. When it was mentioned we have these senators here in the Republican Party here. I mean, this is really to handcuff Trump in working on a new relationship with Russia, maybe a new relationship with NATO and other relationships here. And this is, again, holding back what his agenda, what the people voted for, want. Again, this is something that is coming from both parties here. Again, like the campaign, after the campaign, Trump virtually stands alone against all of it. Go ahead.
And he doesn't seem to care much what the mainstream media says.
Good point.
Now, Phil is exactly right. It's relations with Russia. And these relations are based on the perception of a Russian threat. Now, if you look closely at that Russian threat, it'll be really hard to document it. Most of the threat came after we overturned the government in Kiev in the Ukraine on February 22nd, 2014. The Russians have reacted to that as any normal person would have expected. So that is part of the game, to blacken the Russians, to make sure that we can keep those reasonable, or what do you call them, the rebels that we call moderate rebels in Syria keep going. I mean, we've got billions of dollars invested in them. CIA doesn't want to leave them in the lurch. And this whole tension, it sells not only weapons, but it sells a lot of money for intelligence. I'd like to come back, if I may, to my friend Ambassador Craig Murray. He, like I, am a good friend of Julian Assange. I had dinner with Julian on the 4th of November. And he was riding high because he had revealed all manner of things that needed to be revealed before our election. Now, were these things surreptitious? No. They were factual. This is something to remember. Julian Assange doesn't fool around with any of this stuff. He doesn't edit. He doesn't take off the data on the top. He doesn't take off the Social Security numbers. Even Ed Snowden has a problem with that. But in order to keep this pristine pure, Julian doesn't change anything. So it's ground truth. Now, what did it say?
Yeah.
It said that Hillary Clinton stole the election, stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Oh, what were they going to do about that? That was 2 days before the Democratic convention. Oh, well, let's blame it on the Russians.
Exactly.
But one of the Russians was Julian.
Exactly.
Well, we'll say Julian. And why? Because they wanted Trump to win. It's all a canard.
Yeah, it's a canard.
And the American people are so... Yeah.
James, this is, again, I'm titling this program Russia Card because it is a card that is very easily and conveniently played for just about any woes of the world. You can find a story, you can make up a story, you can connect some imaginary dots here. And I think they've chosen it for the reasons that Philip mentioned and what Ray mentioned, but also it's just very convenient because I did read some of those Wikileaks releases, and it's a lot of work. It's an enormous amount of work going through them. But there are things in there that are embarrassing, that are untruthful, unethical, and this is going after Russia is the simplest, easiest way to say, look this way, not here. Go ahead.
That's right, and of course, it's very unlikely that they can manage to block Trump's election. They will make a good try at it, but what they're really trying to do is poison the well. Yeah. And let's throw one more thing into that: the upcoming battle over the confirmation of Rex Tillerson as the Secretary of State. Again, what's his greatest heresy? That he thinks we actually should get along with Moscow, which is also what the president-elect thinks, which is why all these memes are coming together into a focus. And this is going to be a very dangerous next few weeks going up until the inauguration on January 20th.
You know, Philip, weigh in on that, because one of the things on election day, when the result was announced, 15 minutes later, I was in this studio and we did a program on his victory here. And I foresaw even then, 15 minutes after AP called it, that Donald Trump is going to have an enormous amount of problems with the Republican Party, and we're actually, more leaks are coming out that some Republican leaders were colluding with the Democrats against Trump here. This is going to be a major test for him, a major challenge to get his own, because, I mean, we have a Republican Congress, we have the White House, you know, there's a lot of power vested there, but I don't think they're going to let him rule in any kind of convenient way. It's going to be uphill every single day, and the media, of course, is going to hate him. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm convinced that all of that is true, and plus I would add into the mix the still considerably powerful neoconservatives who are entrenched in the foreign policy of both political parties. These are the guys that are pushing all this kind of stuff. These are the guys that really have been most viscerally anti-Russian for some time now, and of course they have people like Graham and McCain in their pockets, and these are the people that are going to be hostile to the president, even though they will be pretending to be loyal supporters of the Republican Party. And it's not just them. I mean, look at the list of people that opposed Trump in the lead up to the election. There are a lot of so-called Republicans who essentially followed the neocon line and will be basically subverting whatever the president tries to do, specifically in terms of Russian policy.
You know, Ray, one of the interesting things is this meme here is that Vladimir Putin personally was involved and directed the hacking of Hillary Clinton's mails and John Podesta. That's the narrative here. But what's really interesting is that the people that are pushing this narrative is actually, it's like throwing fire on kerosene here, because if we have intelligence agencies that cannot keep America safe, oh my goodness, the country is so weak, it's so fragile, oh my goodness here. I think the intelligence community could get some backlash for that, because if you start believing this false fake news, this conspiracy theory, then America is very, very weak and it's very, very vulnerable. And I think that's a derivative narrative that can come out over this.
Well, that may be so, Peter, but I'd just like to say that if people were really interested in finding out whether it was a leak or a hack and who did it, there is an ambassador in good standing in London whom they could call. Neither the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, nobody has called Ambassador Murray. I just checked with him last night. Still, no one from the United States. They write all these things, and Murray says, I'm at the source. And I can verify that because Murray was in town here at the end of September. I'll let the FBI figure out which days, okay? But he was there. He was here to give, he was emceeing the Sam Adams Award ceremony for John Kiriakou. After it, Craig always goes out to have a drink or some food with us. Well, this time I watched him, and he sort of silently walked backwards over a little hill into a wooded area. And I said, you know, that's really strange. Isn't Craig going to join us? We never saw him again, okay?
Well, he was on RT today.
He says, well,
he was on RT today. Don't worry, he's okay. Go ahead. Keep going, Ray.
All right. Okay. So, when I say we never saw him again, I just mean that he didn't join us for the party. He had more important things to do. Okay. And I would have to say that the FBI or the Homeland Security folks who were supposed to follow him that day, I was going to say they should be fired, but they'd probably be moved up to higher positions now, because that's what misfeasance or malfeasance.
Okay, let me go to James here. Give him the last word here. Yeah. You know what? You know, this ploy, this fake news, this conspiracy theory is actually going to work. It's going to sour potential better relations between the two countries. I unfortunately think that's going to be the case. Your reaction? Go ahead, real quick.
Let me disagree and give you a hopeful note here. Let's remember that it was after this campaign started that Trump nominated Tillerson. I think he relishes this fight. He says, you guys want to fight about this? Let's have a fight. And these are the same people that underestimated him when he was facing 16 Republican rivals, underestimated him when he was fighting Hillary Clinton. I wouldn't be so sure if I were these people that they're going to beat him.
You know what, James? I like that.
And he beat them all.
And he beat them all. All right, we've run out of time. Fascinating discussion. Many thanks to my guests in Washington, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.
I love you.